Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today I've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings, some more updates following Game 4s from each of the second round series, a couple of injury updates, and some trade rumors involving Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets, James Van Riemsdyk from Philadelphia, and Josh Bailey from the New York Islanders. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. As usual, I'll kick things off with a couple of signings that have happened recently from around the NHL. We will start with the contract extensions that have happened. There are a couple, both on the smaller side of things, but contract extensions nonetheless. The Winnipeg Jets have extended depth forward Dominic Tornado to a 2-year contract extension. They'll have an average annual value of $775,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next season. Now, Tornado, over the past couple of years, has split time between the NHL and AHL. It's basically been his career. He's been a really good depth forward, been really good when he's been called upon, but for the most part, he's been a good AHL forward that's gotten some NHL opportunities. He spent the last 3 years with the Winnipeg Jets. This past year, did not get into very many NHL games, but did have a really productive AHL season. Only got into 5 NHL games. Put up an assist and didn't look that bad, but with the Jets' depth that they got, especially after a deadline, there was just no room for him on the NHL roster, so they sent him down to the AHL, and there he had 19 goals and 35 points in 50 games. So not a bad season for Tornado. I think the extension is really good. Tornado's worked in really well over the past couple of seasons with Winnipeg, being more of a minor league forward, being called upon at the NHL level when he needs to, and I think he'll work really well. So if the Jets need him, and the Jets lose guys like Scheifele and Dubois and Wheeler in the offseason this year, and don't really replace them, I could see Tornado find a role on the roster this year. But if they do still have some pretty good depth, he could still be a good spare forward, maybe even play in the minors again. So, good signing for Tornado. I think 2 more years on a 2A contract is really good, and I think he should continue to do really well with the Winnipeg Jets. Over with the Calgary Flames, they sent a young player to a 2-year contract extension, and that is Walker Duehr, as Duehr signed a 2-year, $825,000 deal to remain with the Calgary Flames. Now, Duehr really hadn't been playing much in the NHL, had gotten over the past couple of years a couple of opportunities, was mostly an AHL forward. I mean, last year put up 11 goals and 23 points in 59 AHL games, but only got into 1 NHL game, so he wasn't really a good NHL forward. But this year he actually got a decent amount of NHL action and was able to capitalize on it. I mean, he was still, for a majority of the season, a minor league forward, putting up 15 goals and 26 points in 41 games, so over how many points he had last season and in less games. And then at the NHL level, he did even better, putting up 7 goals and 11 points in 27 games. It's like a bomb 6 forward for the Flames. So he looked really good. I do like how Duehr played in the NHL, and I think in time he could definitely continue to be a really good forward. So in my opinion, I would probably say he's maybe like a bomb 6 forward next year. But I think he could definitely make the NHL roster next year, especially with how well he played in his little showing at the NHL level. So I like the signing from the Calgary Flames. It's really cheap. It's under $850,000, so it's not that big of a payment. And given how well he played last year, he could definitely be a really good 4th or 3rd line forward this year. So good signing for both the Calgary Flames and Winnipeg Jets to get those contract extensions done. Next, over with the entry-level contract signings, I will start with the LA Kings. The Kings signed goalie Eric Portillo to a 2-year, $875,000 deal. The deal did begin before the season finished for the Los Angeles Kings. Now, for the Los Angeles Kings, they acquired Portillo at the trade deadline from the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for a 3rd-round pick, as Portillo was an unsigned college prospect, but didn't really want to sign with the Buffalo Sabres, as the Sabres have guys like Levi and Luukkonen in their lineup, and he didn't really see a fit long-term with the Sabres. So he wasn't going to sign with Buffalo. Buffalo wanted to get something in return, so they moved him to LA for a 3rd-round pick. Portillo looks like he could be eventually a good starting goaltender, but for now it's probably AHL player, maybe a backup. Last year he had some fantastic numbers, putting up a 2.14 goals against average and a .926 save percentage in 42 games. Looked really good. This year, a little bit of a down year, but still had pretty good numbers, putting up a 3.00 goals against average and a .908 save percentage in 38 games. So a little bit less playing time, a little bit down on the numbers, but Portillo still looks to be a really good goaltender. I'll expect him to maybe play a year in the AHL next year, but but after that, he should be at least an NHL backup, if not an NHL tandem goalie after that. So Portillo looks like a really good goaltender. He didn't get into any NHL or AHL games for the Kings this year, but was their third-string goaltender in the playoffs. So if one of those guys in like Korpisalo and Copley got hurt, it's quite possible Portillo could have started an NHL game, but he didn't. So next year, hopefully he can get into some NHL and maybe AHL action for the LA Kings. And then a couple of other signings here. First, the St. Louis Blues signed prospect Leo Louf to a 3-year, $868,000 deal, and that deal will begin at the start of next season. Louf was a 2020 third-round pick from the St. Louis Blues. He's been playing over in Liga over the past couple of seasons. Put up 4 goals and 10 points in 48 games last year. Had 4 goals, 16 points in 55 games this year. So he's had some pretty good seasons over in Liga. He's a good left shot defenseman, and I think in time he could definitely be a good third pair defenseman. Louf's had a couple of years to develop, so I would expect him to probably go to the minors next year. Maybe spend a year or two in the minors, but in time, I think Louf could definitely be a challenge for like a third pair role in the St. Louis Blues on the defensive end. So a really good sign for St. Louis Blues to get him under contract. And lastly, with the Seattle Kraken, they signed 2022 third-round pick Jaeger Furcus to a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $923,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next season. Furcus was a early second-round pick from this past year's draft, the 2022 draft, and he looked like one of the players who could have gone in the top end of the draft, in the top 32 in the first round, but he wound up falling to the second round, and the Seattle Kraken were able to get him. So he looks like he could be eventually a really good middle six forward, maybe playing consistent second line minutes. He's a good right winger who's been playing over in the WHL over the past couple of seasons. Last year, he had a pretty decent season, putting up 36 goals and 80 points in 66 games. This year, a little bit better production, putting up 40 goals and 88 points in 66 games. So he looks really good. I'll expect Furcus to probably play in the AHL next year, just so he can continue to grow, but wouldn't surprise me in 2 to 3 years if Furcus was able to challenge for a consistent NHL roster spot. I think Furcus, in time, should definitely be an extremely talented forward for the Seattle Kraken. So, good signings all around. Furcus signing in Seattle, I think, is really good. Furcus should definitely be a good middle six forward in a couple of years' time. Louf gets his entry-level contract from the St. Louis Blues. That's good. I think in a couple of years, Louf could at least challenge for like a third pair spot. Portillo for the LA Kings gets his entry-level contract. Could be a good starting goaltender in a couple of years' time for the Kings. Could be a good backup goalie as early as next year. And then good contract extensions for Toninato and Dewar, who at the moment would both be pretty good bottom six forwards for their respective teams in Winnipeg and Calgary. And that's all the signings I'm going to get to today. Next, we go over to the playoff updates from the past couple of days, as all series in the NHL have now played Game 4. So we'll get to all those games now. First, since we last talked, all these games were Game 4. As we talked, the Panthers were one away from eliminating the Leafs, while the Canes, Kraken, and Golden Knights all had 2-1 series leads. So first of the four to play was the Carolina Hurricanes, New Jersey Devils. It was a pretty even game after the first. Jack Hughes opened the scoring for the Devils, and then Martin Necas got a goal for the Carolina Hurricanes late in the first. So it was 1-1 going into the first. It looked pretty good. But then after the 7-minute mark of the second period, things opened up for Carolina. They would score 4 goals within, I'm pretty sure, like a 5 or 6 minute period, including the 5th goal from Brent Burns, to give the Carolina Hurricanes a 5-1 lead. Jordan Martinook in this clip I'm going to show you here at the end of the second period would make it 6-1 Carolina Hurricanes, and that is the way the second ended, that is the way the third ended, that is the way the game ended, as the Carolina Hurricanes, after giving up the first goal, score 6 unanswered, including 5 in the second period, and take Game 4 from the New Jersey Devils 6-1. So for the Devils, they're pushed to the brink of elimination now. They can be eliminated later tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes, so they're going to need to put their best foot forward in tonight's game if they have any shot of sending this one back to Jersey for Game 6. Once again, the goaltenders have not do really well. Once again, they made goalie changes in the middle of the game. Just not really good showing. I mean, all of these games, these round 2 series games for the Carolina Hurricanes, New Jersey Devils, have been blowouts. I mean, both games in Jersey were 6-1 Canes and 8-4 Devils. And both games in Carolina were blowouts for the Hurricanes. So, definitely been a high-scoring affair for the winning team. And I can't wait to see if the Devils are able to push Game 6 tonight, or if this series is ended tonight and Carolina is going to the first conference final since 2019. And then we had the Dallas Stars play the Seattle Kraken. It started out as a pretty decent game. Jamie Benn scored in the first period to make it 1-0 Stars, but then the Stars would add a couple of goals in the middle of the second period to take a 3-0 lead by the middle of the game. Just after they took a 3-0 lead from Max Domi, Jane Schwartz would cut the lead to 3-1, but the Seattle Kraken weren't able to make it closer. Roope Hintz scored at the end of the second to make it 4-1 Stars. That's the game it went to the third period, 4-1 Dallas. They were able to get another goal in the third period to make it 5-1. But after that, Jane Schwartz and Adam Larson would score a couple goals, and with about 5 minutes left, they made a game of it, cutting the Stars' lead to 5-3. But after that, an empty net goal from Max Domi, the second of the night for him, led to the 6th goal of the game for the Stars and put this game out of reach, as the Stars were able to hold on and double up the Kraken 6-3 and take Game 4 to knot up the series at 2 apiece. So for the Stars, that was a much-needed win, a much better performance from Jake Ottinger. They did get Miro Heiskanen back, so he was a huge force on the defensive end. Thomas Harley had a nice game. Max Domi had a pretty good game. And that team was able to outduel the Seattle Kraken. So going back to Dallas, both teams have won in Dallas, both teams have won in Seattle. Going to be interesting to see who takes a 3-2 series lead going into Game 6 on Saturday tonight. But pretty good game from both sides in that one. Just Dallas was the better team in this one. Then we went over to yesterday's game action. The Leafs were playing to avoid elimination against the Florida Panthers last night. It was pretty closely contested. It was a scoreless game after one. Then early in the second, William Nylander was able to score a power play goal to put the Maple Leafs up 1-0. That's the way the second period ended. The Leafs were able to hold on to a 1-0 lead. Then midway through the third period, the Leafs were able to get this goal here, I'll show you a clip of, from Mitch Marner, who had a 2-point in Game 4, to give the Maple Leafs a 2-0 lead. Now, just a couple of minutes after this goal, Sam Reinhart was able to score for the Florida Panthers on the power play, cutting the Maple Leafs lead to 2-1. I know a lot of people probably thought that the Panthers were going to make another comeback, send this one to overtime, maybe win in regulation. But in this game, the Leafs were able to hold their own. They were able to keep the 2-1 lead, and that's the way the game would end. So, Leafs win 2-1 over the Panthers, and they save their season for at least one game. And they send this one back to Toronto to try and stave off elimination again tomorrow night. So, interesting game, but Panthers are not able to sweep, and the Leafs avoid elimination. And it'll be really interesting to see if they can do it again tomorrow and send this one back to a Game 6 on Sunday. And then lastly here we had the Golden Knights and the Oilers. Once again, it was all Oilers in the first period, a 3-goal first period, including goals from Bukestad and Bouchard to give the Oilers a 3-0 lead. They were able to add another one from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in the second period to make it 4-0. Nick Roy would score a goal for the Golden Knights in the third period to cut the lead to 4-1, but the Golden Knights were just not able to get the win. The Oilers came away with the 4-1 victory in Edmonton and gnawed that series up at 2 apiece. So the series shifts back to Vegas. The winner of tomorrow's game in Vegas will take a 3-2 series lead to Edmonton with a chance to end the series. Now, there's also a lot of rough stuff in last night's game. Matthias Ekholm cross-checked Mark Stone in the back, which was not called, which led to a third goal for the Edmonton Oilers. Vander Kane pushed Alex Pietrangelo into the boards. There was game misconduct, but no penalty, if I'm correct. Alex Pietrangelo had a really bad slashing call. Really sort of chopped at Leon Draisaitl's gloves. He was ejected from the game. Darnell Nurse had sort of an instigator penalty in the final minute of the game when he instigated a fight against Nick Hague. So there was a lot of rough stuff in that game. That series seems to be getting extremely heated. I know there was a lot of talk about suspensions. I'm not sure if Nurse will get one or not. I know there's a rule in the NHL that says that if a player is an instigator in the final minute of a game and starts a fight, then he could be suspended up for one game. So I'm not sure if Nurse will get suspended. But in my opinion, there was a lot of people who said Pietrangelo should get suspended for slashing Draisaitl. There was a lot of people who said Kane should get suspended for pushing Pietrangelo into the boards. In my opinion, you either suspend both of them or suspend neither of them. I think both calls were the same level of egregiousness. I know Golden Knights would say that the Kane call is worse, and Oilers fans would say that the Draisaitl call is worse. But in reality, I think both are not really overly great, and I think both could have definitely been avoided. So, in my opinion, you either suspend both Kane and Pietrangelo for Game 5, and you take one player out of each team, or you don't suspend either of them. I think at this point in the playoffs, you either suspend both for one game, or you don't suspend either. That's just my opinion on what I think the NHL should do, but I think the Pietrangelo call was bad on Draisaitl. I think the Kane call was bad on Pietrangelo. And I think both should usually be one-game suspensions, or neither should get suspensions. I don't think they should be like Pietrangelo should be suspended and Kane shouldn't, or vice versa. So, in my opinion, I think either both will be suspended or neither will be. But I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Should Pietrangelo and or Kane be suspended for Game 5 after those calls in the last 5 minutes in Game 4 in the Oilers Golden Knights series? But the Oilers were able to come with the win and tie the series up and push Game 5, and now we know that there's going to be Game 6 in Edmonton on Sunday. So those are all the series now. The Carolina Hurricanes go into today with a chance to end the series in 5. The Panthers will go into tomorrow with a chance to end the series in 5. So 2 more chances for elimination. Meanwhile, the Stars Kraken in the West and the Knights Oilers in the West, both 2-all series going back to Vegas and Dallas for Game 5. So definitely going to be interesting to see how these next few days play out. And by the time we talk again on Tuesday, we could have both of the conference final matchups locked in. So definitely interesting to see. And I can't wait to talk about how most of these series will finish on Tuesday. But that's all the playoff update we're going to talk about for today. Next, we go over to the injury update part of the video. Now, there's not too many injuries, but there were a couple, and a couple of significant ones. So, first with the Dallas Stars, they were able to get Miro Heiskanen back from his upper body injury, and he did not miss any time at all. We know that Heiskanen took a puck to the face in Game 3 against the Seattle Kraken, really was injured, did not return to that game. There was a lot of questions about whether he would return, and he was able to return, and he did get back into game action in Game 4. So good for Heiskanen, good to see that he was alright, and he didn't miss much action. But besides that, Jani Hakanpää, who's a good defender for the Dallas Stars, missed Game 4 due to a lower body injury, and he missed time. So while they did have Heiskanen in the game against the Seattle Kraken in Game 4, they did not have Hakanpää. So it wasn't a great situation for the Dallas Stars, but they were able to make do without it. And then in Game 4, Mason Marchment suffered an upper body injury, and he left the game, never returned, and he's currently out with the upper body injury. So going to be interesting to see if Marchment or Hakanpää are able to return to game action for tonight's game against the Seattle Kraken. But really bad news to see Marchment go down with the injury. He's been a really good, productive middle six forward, so hopefully he's not out for an overly long period of time and maybe can get back into game action tonight. With the Seattle Kraken, they were able to get Jared McCann back into the lineups. Now, we know that McCann took a really bad hit from Cale Makar that gave Cale Makar a 1-game suspension in Game 4 of the first round series. So McCann missed the rest of Game 4. He also missed Game 5, 6, and 7 of the first round series, plus Games 1, 2, and 3 of the first round series. So he's been out for 6 playoff games. So good to see McCann get back into the lineup. He wasn't overly productive in the first 3.5 games of the first round series, but he was one of the better forwards in the regular season. So good to see McCann, who's a good top 6 forward, get back into the lineup for Seattle. Then with the Maple Leafs injuries on the goaltending side, Samsonov did not go for last night's game. Joseph Woll was a starter, and Samsonov's currently day-to-day right now with upper body injuries, so not good. We know that Samsonov left Game 3 due to an injury, so hopefully he's not out for an overly long period of time and he can get back in the near future. As for the Leafs' other goaltender, Matt Murray, after suffering injury in early April, he was cleared and backed up Joseph Woll last night, so good to see Murray at least be on the bench and back up last night's game. Murray's still an okay goaltender. I think for the time being he's still their third stringer, second stringer with Samsonov out. But still, I think he's a really good goaltender and good to see that he has recovered from his injury. Then with a couple of Edmonton Oilers, after Game 3, Zach Hyman was injured from the Edmonton Oilers, and he had suffered an undisclosed injury, but was able to return for last night's game against the Vegas Golden Knights, and was able to get back into game action. So good news for the Oilers. Hyman's a huge piece of that top 6, and if he were to miss last night's game, maybe the Oilers don't win 4-1. So good to see that Hyman was able to quickly recover from his injury. As for Mattias Janmark, who missed Game 3 due to an undisclosed injury, he was able to get back as well in Game 4. So good news for the Oilers to get Janmark and Hyman back. Hyman's a good top 6 forward. Janmark's a good bomb 6 forward. So good to see both of those guys get back off of their injuries. And good to see they were very productive in last night's game in their 4-1 victory. And then one injury update here with a team who's currently eliminated from the playoffs, and that is the Colorado Avalanche, as Arturi Lehkonen has suffered a toe injury, and he's going to be out for an unknown period of time. But with the Avalanche being out, he should be ready for training camp next year. So I don't expect that injury to be too significant, but just really bad news for Lehkonen to get an injury. But still, with the Avalanche on the playoffs right now, it doesn't really matter for Lehkonen, and hopefully in the next couple of months he can recover and he's healthy again before training camp starts next August and September. So these are injury updates I'm going to talk about for today. And then finally here we're going to go to the trade rumor part of the video. So we've got a couple of things to talk about here. First, I want to talk about James Van Riemsdyk. Now, Van Riemsdyk is a pending unrestricted free agent. He's spent the past couple of seasons with Philadelphia. Only ever spent his career with either the Philadelphia Flyers or Toronto Maple Leafs. Started with the Flyers, then went to Toronto, then re-signed with the Flyers. He's been with the Flyers ever since, so it's most likely he's done with the Flyers, and I don't think the Leafs are going to sign him, so I would expect him to probably go to a new team this year, a team he hasn't played for in his career yet. And I think that a good fit for James Van Riemsdyk would be the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal is a team who's looking to become a little bit more competitive this year. There's a lot of talk about the Canadiens maybe acquiring Dubois from the Winnipeg Jets. There's a lot of talk they're trying to improve this team a little bit more so they're a little bit more competitive next year. Maybe not make the playoffs level competitive, but definitely a little bit more competitive. And they're going to be getting rid of a couple of players who did not do really well for them as bottom six forwards. Like, they already got rid of Evgeny Dodonov. Drouin's most likely not going to be back as a middle six forward. I would expect them to try and move on from the contract of Mike Hoffman in the offseason. So they're going to need at least a couple of veterans who can come in and definitely replace some of these guys. And I think James Van Riemsdyk would be a really good fit with the Montreal Canadiens. He's a good veteran. He knows what it takes to win. Even though he hasn't been a very productive forward over the past couple of seasons, he's still been quite productive. I mean, last year he had 24 goals and 38 points in 81 games. This year, not as productive, only put up 12 goals and 29 points, but only played in 61 games due to the fact that he was injured at some points this year. So I think James Van Riemsdyk could be a really good addition to the Canadiens. Now, would he want to go to a team who's in the bottom of half of the standings and most likely not going to make the playoffs next year? That's debatable, and I think it's quite possible that James Van Riemsdyk will probably want to go to a contender rather than a younger team like Montreal. But still, I think he could actually be a really good fit. If you put him on the third line with maybe like a Brendan Gallagher and a Jake Evans, or a young player, maybe even put him with like a young Owen Beck if Owen Beck makes the team next year, he could actually be a really good forward. He's still a really good goal scorer, and he's a good veteran to have on a younger team like Montreal. So I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, and I'm definitely not saying that James Van Riemsdyk wants to go to Montreal or will go to Montreal, but I'm just saying that's a pretty good fit. I think Van Riemsdyk on like a third line wing, being a good scoring forward for the Montreal Canadiens, helping some of those younger guys continue to grow, I think would actually be a really good addition for Montreal. And I think Van Riemsdyk will be a huge upgrade on some of these guys like Drouin or Hoffman, who have not been producing overly well over the past couple of years. So, in my opinion, if the Canadiens are looking for a couple of top 9 forwards in the offseason to try and replace guys like Drouin and Monahan and Hoffman in the forward group, I would try and target James Van Riemsdyk. And even though he might not want to sign with a rebuilding team and might want to go to a team who is challenging for the Cup, I think Van Riemsdyk would be a perfect fit with Montreal and their younger core. But definitely, let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think Van Riemsdyk would be a good fit in Montreal? And would he be a really good fit in their top 9? But next we go over to the New York Islanders. Now, the Islanders have a couple of things to figure out this offseason, and one of them is Josh Bailey. We talked about this in the Islanders offseason plans video, where the Islanders would most likely want to move on from the Josh Bailey contract. Last year, he had a pretty decent season, putting up 14 goals and 44 points in 74 games. Wasn't a very productive forward, was playing mostly on the third line, but still was a very productive depth forward for the Islanders. This year, did not do as good. Only had 8 goals and 25 points and played in 64 games and was a healthy scratch for most of the second half of the season, plus all of the playoff games. So it doesn't look like Bailey has much of a future now with the Islanders, and I would expect him to be dealt. And I would expect one of the bottom end teams like Arizona or Chicago to maybe try and acquire him. We've seen this happen a few times with some of these teams. Chicago, just before the trade deadline, acquired Nikita Zaitsev for a second and fourth round pick. When Gosper wasn't playing too well, the Arizona Coyotes acquired him for a second round pick. The Arizona Coyotes acquired a guy like Anton Strawman, who did not have a favorable contract, for a second round pick. The Arizona Coyotes acquired Andrew Ladd from the Islanders for a couple second round picks and a third round pick when it did not look like Ladd was going to play well with the Islanders. So there's definitely been a couple of trades like this where the team who doesn't have a really good contract trades to a lower-end team who's looking for money in exchange for a draft pick as well. So, in my opinion, I could see the Islanders maybe move like a third or maybe even a second round pick in one of the next couple of years to try and move Bailey. I think Bailey could definitely be a really good fit with Chicago or Arizona. Arizona could probably use another couple top 9 forwards, especially ones with some money over the next couple of years to try and get themselves up above the cap. So I think Bailey would be a good fit for Arizona. He's a good veteran forward as well too, so he could work well with a younger team like that. For Chicago, we know that they're going to get Connor Bedard in the draft in June, so they're going to have the first overall pick. So it's quite possible that to try and get some more good veterans to play with Bedard. And while Bailey isn't the greatest of veterans, he could still be a good player playing with Bedard maybe on line 1 if the Blackhawks see fit to that. But I think Bailey to the Hawks or the Yotes was just a matter of time. I think at some point Arizona or Chicago will take on that $5 million contract, and we'll probably get a second or third round pick in return to do it. But definitely, I think Bailey is most likely going to be gone for the Islanders. I don't see how Bailey fits in the team long term, and I think going to a team like Arizona or Chicago where he can regrow his game, continue to play like consistent top 9 minutes, and then maybe one of those two teams who acquire him, eat half of his salary given the fact he's only in the final year of his deal, and trade him at the trade line if he's playing good. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but I think Arizona or Chicago could definitely try and acquire Bailey for a draft pick and then move him at the deadline later on. But definitely, I think Bailey's going to be gone in New York, but I'd like to know what you think. Does Bailey get moved from the Islanders? And if so, which bottom feeder team do you think the Islanders would move into? And what sort of return do you think the Islanders would be willing to give up if they were able to move on from the Bailey contract? And finally here with Mark Scheifele. Now, over the past little while, we've talked about how the Jets are going to have some major changes in their lineup this year, as guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois don't want to be there anymore. He wants to go to Montreal. There's most likely going to be a trade in the offseason for Dubois, going to most likely to Montreal. And then there's also guys like Connor Hellebuck, Mark Scheifele, and Blake Wheeler, who are all entering the final year of their contracts and possibly use fresh starts. So, in my opinion, I think Scheifele is most likely one of the guys who are most likely going to go. Scheifele's had a pretty good season over the past couple of seasons. He wasn't able to top his couple 80-point seasons that he's had earlier in his career, but had some pretty productive seasons. Last year at 29 goals and 70 points in 61 games, so he's over a point per game pace. This year was his first season topping 40 goals, as he put up 42 goals and 68 points in 81 games. So Scheifele looks like a really good top 6 center, but I'm not sure if he fits in long term with the Jets. I know that he's a really good center. I'm pretty sure the Jets would love to have him, but I'm not sure if Scheifele will really remain with the Jets. And if he doesn't want to sign a contract extension, then I would expect him to be moved to another team. And just looking through a couple of teams who could probably be a good fit for Scheifele, I think the Colorado Avalanche and the Boston Bruins will be two perfect fits for Mark Scheifele. Now, if you look at the Boston Bruins, they're pretty tight against the cap, and Scheifele will have a year left in the offseason at $6.13 million cap hit, so he's not going to come cheap, but with the Bruins reportedly possibly moving on from a couple of contracts, some even decent size, I think they will be able to fit in Mark Scheifele. Now, with guys like Bergeron and Krejci possibly retiring after this year, I think it's quite possible that the team could be needing to look for one or two top-line centers. So, if the team needs a couple of top-line centers, they're probably going to need to trade for one or two of them. Why not trade for Mark Scheifele? He's a really good top-line center. He could put up a lot of points. Imagine Mark Scheifele playing with Marchand and Pastrnak. That would be a really scary top line. And I think Scheifele would actually be a really good fit for the Boston Bruins. So, what sort of a trade package would the Bruins have to give up for Scheifele, in my opinion? Well, it would take a decent first or second round pick. The Bruins don't have very many of those. So I'll probably have to say a 2025 top 10 protected first round pick for Boston would have to be what they give up if they are going to try and keep this team competitive next year. I would definitely think they'll be willing to at least consider trading their first round pick in 2025. So in my opinion, they would include a top 10 protected 2025 first round pick. They would have to include a decent level prospect. The Jets already have a boatload of defensive prospects. They're even having trouble finding Hainala NHL time. So in my opinion, with all the defensive prospects, they would need a top-end forward prospect. So I'd be looking at guys like maybe move one of Matthew Poitras, or John Beecher, or Trevor Kuntar. I think they have to move at least one of those three guys. All three are really good centers who should be able to be, at very least, top 9 centers in the NHL in a couple of years' time. And with the Jets most likely moving on from Scheifele and Dubois in the offseason, they could definitely use a good center prospect who could definitely be a good NHL forward in the next couple of years. So, in my opinion, you have to part with either one of Poitras, Kuntar, or Beecher. And on top of that, I would also move Matt Grzelcyk. Grzelcyk's a really good defender. I think he'll fit in really well with the Jets' top six. Only has a year left on his contract, so if it doesn't work out, the Jets aren't good. The Jets could trade him in next year's deadline, so it will definitely be interesting to see. But I think a trade package of a top 10 protected first-round pick in 2025, one prospect, whether it be Kuntar, Poitras, or Beecher, and then Matt Grzelcyk on the defensive end, would be a huge package for the Jets to get Mark Scheifele in. It would help them in their top four on the defensive end right now. It would give them a future top six center, and it would give them a good first-round pick in a couple of years' time. So I think that could be a good trade package for the Jets if they were able to trade Mark Scheifele. As for the Colorado Avalanche, we know that Gabriel Landeskog's not going to be healthy this year. We know that the team really does need some more forward help. They could use a top six winger. They could use a second line center. So, in my opinion, Scheifele would be a phenomenal addition to that team. He would slot in right behind McKinnon. He could be a really good second line center right behind McKinnon. Definitely be a really good, hard to play against forward. Now, the Avalanche are in the Jets division, so it might be a little bit more difficult to make a trade work. But in my opinion, the Avalanche have their first round pick this year. It's probably going to finish somewhere between the 23rd and 26th overall pick in this year's draft. So with the Avalanche having that pick, they could trade that pick to Winnipeg. They could also trade good young forward. I would probably consider one of Ben Meyers, Sampo Ranta, or Oscar Oleasen. All three are really good players. Rantas has shown some NHL level talent, getting a couple of looks at the NHL level. Oleasen's a former first round pick. And Ben Meyers looks like a really good bomb six forward. So I think all three of those two guys could definitely be included in a trade. And then I would also include Sam Girard in the trade, who would be a good top four defender in Colorado long term. On top of those guys, I'll probably include someone like a Brendan Dillon in the trade for the Avalanche, just given the fact that the Avs do need some defensive help. Dillon only has a year left on his contract. He does have to make a pretty decent amount of money, but I think it would be a really good fit on that third pair for the Colorado Avalanche. So in my opinion, you just get that high-level first-round pick, somewhere between 23rd and 26th overall in this year's draft. They get a good young player in either Oleasen, Meyers, or Ranta, and they also get a good young defender in Girard, who signed for a couple more years at $5 million, and would be a really good addition to their top four. As for the Avalanche, they get Mark Scheifele, who would fit in quite well as a second-line center behind McKinnon, and Brendan Dillon, who would be a really good third pair of defensemen on the left side for the Avalanche. And I think this is a pretty good trade for both sides. The Jets get a good first round pick, they get a good prospect who could be a good maybe middle six forward the next couple of seasons, and they get a good young defender who signed for a couple more seasons who can help them offensively. The Jets get a good third pair of defensemen who can maybe help them replace a guy like Eric Johnson, and they get a second line center who can hopefully help them over the next year and keep that team remaining competitive. So in my opinion, those would be two really good trade options for the Jets to have. I think Scheifele will fit in quite well as either like a top two center in Boston or second line center behind McKinnon in Colorado. I think both teams could definitely use Scheifele this year, and those trade packages I think would definitely intrigue Winnipeg's interest. So in my opinion, I do think Scheifele is a very likely candidate to be traded, and just looking at it from some of these viewpoints, I think Colorado and Boston will be extremely good landing spots for Scheifele long term. But definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. Does Scheifele wind up getting traded in the offseason this year? And if so, would Colorado or Boston be one of your top destinations for Scheifele to go this offseason? Or would you have someone else try and acquire Scheifele? Let me know if you think Colorado or Boston are most likely options, or if you think there's another team down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.